Welcome back, my beautiful meat-bearing friends. Pull the blankets up to your chin, double check that the locks are clicked, and try to ignore that cold draft currently tickling the back of your neck. I'm your host, the Phantom Navigator, and tonight we are charting a course straight into a damp, toxic, and utterly unhinged underworld of Japanese death lore. We've all heard the cozy stories of our ancestors gently drifting down to check on us over a plate of cookies. But tonight, we are skipping the pleasantries. Tonight, we're talking about what happens when the ritual fails, when the bureaucracy of the afterlife collapses, and when the dead decide they'd rather hitch a ride on your spine than cross the river. Congratulations, you survived another year. Unfortunately, your dead ancestors are about to drop by to make sure you're still disappointed in your life choices. Welcome to Obon, Japanese annual 3-day cosmic family reunion, held every year around August 13th to 15th. Though some purists in Tokyo celebrate it mid-July, because even the dead have to beat the holiday traffic. So in Tokyo, they celebrated between the July 13th and 16th. But what is Obon? What is the beautiful Buddhist Confucian tradition where the veil between the living and the dead dissolves? Or, as I like to call it, the Great Supernatural Parole Week. The gates of hell literally swing open, and millions of spirits flood Japan looking for free food and a ride. And how do we welcome them? With veggie-based transportation. With a cucumber, they call it the shoyu uma, or spirit horse. The dead ride this into town on day one. Why a cucumber horse? Because it's fast. We want great grandpa to get here quickly so he can eat our food before it goes bad. So yeah, they usually make horses out of vegetables, usually with a cucumber and toothpicks. The eggplant, the Shoryu Ushi, spirit ox, they ride this back into the underworld on day 3. Why an eggplant ox? Because it's slow. We want them to take their sweet time leaving. Take care, Grandma. Enjoy the scenery. Don't rush back into the void. It's basically the polite Japanese equivalent of lingering by the door while your guests put on their shoes. But this isn't paper lanterns, and this isn't just all paper lanterns and beautiful dances. Obon comes with rules, dark, paranoid rules. If you break them, you don't just offend your ancestors, you join them. Rule 1, do not go near the water. If you take a dip in the ocean during Obon, you're asking for it. The superstition is simple. Defunia Yurei, boat ghosts, and various other soggy, resentful spirits are waiting just below the surface. They've been burning in hell all year and they want a friend. If you swim, they will drag you down by your ankles to pull you into their watery grave. It is actually just rip currents and dangerous jellyfish blooms that naturally occur in mid-August? Sure, science says yes, but the screaming dead want to drown you. Is a much more effective way to keep your kids out of the deep end. Rule 2, keep your feet covered. Sleeping with your feet sticking out of the blanket during Obon? Absolutely not. The spirits are roaming your halls, and they apparently have a massive foot grabbing fetish. The superstition says that they will grab your cold, exposed ankles and pull you straight into the underworld. Keep the blanket tucked. Sweat through the Japanese summer humidity. It's better than waking up dead. Rule 3. The Bon Odori dance is not optional. Around mid-August, you'll see towns gather around a wooden scaffold to dance in circles. It's called Bon Odori. It looks cute, right? It's not. Historically, this dance was performed to comfort the dead so they wouldn't curse the harvest. You are dancing with the ghosts. If you look too closely at the person dancing next to you, the yukata, and their feet aren't touching the ground, you just keep dancing. Do not stop. If you stop dancing, they'll notice you're alive. Rule 4. The final eviction, Toro Nagashi. On a last night, August 15th, we light giant bonfires on mountains and float beautiful, glowing paper lanterns down the rivers. Do not be fooled by the aesthetic. It is beautiful, glowing eviction notice. The lanterns are meant to guide the spirits back to the land of the dead so they don't linger in your house, eating your snacks and messing with your Wi-Fi. We literally burn giant kanji characters into the hillsides to say, the party is over, follow the light, get out. So this August, pack your bags, carve your vegetables, and keep your socks on. Because Grandma is coming back, and she is still mad you haven't married yet. Let's start with a little spatial awareness. If you're currently looking for an apartment in Tokyo and you find a gorgeous, spacious place for half the market price, congratulations! You've probably stumbled upon Jikobuken, a stigmatized property. In Japan, Shinto laws of spiritual hygiene mean that if your kitchen window looks out over a sea of vertical family gravestones, your rent gets slashed by 50%. Why? Because the living world is absolutely terrified of the passive-aggressive, cold-blooded energy of a graveyard. Traditionalists will tell you that a cemetery is a sponge for kigar, the literal pollution of death. If you walk through a Japanese graveyard and make the amateur mistake of tripping over a stone, do not just get up and brush off your knees. In local folklore, that wasn't a loose pebble. That was a dead hand grabbing your ankle to pull you down to their level. If you fall, the rule is simple. Get up, walk out, throw a handful of coarse salt over your chest, and pray the ground forgets your name. And whatever you do not point at a tombstone. Point at a grave. And your finger might just start rotting from the inside out. The dead do not appreciate being directed like traffic. But why are they so touchy? Well, to understand the anger of a Japanese ghost, you have to understand how they get buried. We aren't talking about individual 6-foot deep pine boxes here. Almost everyone in modern Japan is cremated, and their ashes are packed into a multi-generational family grave. Underneath that heavy vertical stone monument sits a hollow crypt called the Karuto. When you die, your urn gets stuffed in there alongside your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your weird uncle Takashi. But what happens when the family tomb runs out of room? Do they bury a bigger plot? Do they bury a bigger plot? Oh, sweet summer child. No. They just slide the stone door open, take the oldest urns, dump the ancestral ashes directly onto the dirt floor at the bottom of the tomb, and reuse the ceramic pots. It is the ultimate circle of life recycling program. We all end up as a collective pile of family dust anyway, so why pay for extra pottery? In the process of getting into that urn, it's most burial hands-on cremation ritual on the planet. It's called katsuaj, the bone picking. After the furnace does its job, the family doesn't just get a neat box of gray powder. They get a tray of hot, calcified bones. The immediate family member gathers around with oversized chopsticks. Working in pairs, they pick up the bone fragments, starting from the feet and working their way up to the skull. Passing the bones from chopstick to chopstick before dropping them into the urn. The very last bone they pick up is the notobotoke, the throat bone. It's the second cervical vertebra, and it is prized because it naturally looks like a tiny seated Buddha in deep meditation. This, by the way, is why if you are eating ramen in Tokyo and you pass a piece of pork directly from your chopsticks to your friend's chopsticks, the entire restaurant will look at you like you just desecrated a temple. You are literally mimicking the handling of a fresh corpse at a dinner table. Don't do it. Use a plate. You absolute heathens. Once the bones are packed, the soul has to make its terrifying journey across the Sanzu River, Japan's much nastier version of the river Styx. To help the deceased navigate the celestial tollway, the family dresses the body in Shinni Shokuzuku, a stark white kimono wrapped right over left. Don't ever wear a kimono right over left while you're alive unless you want everyone to assume you recently crossed the mortal threshold. In their head, they get a little white triangular paper hat called Hitaikakushi. It's not a fashion statement. It's a spiritual helmet designed to keep roaming demons from hijacking the empty meat sack of their corpse. Most importantly, the family slips 6 paper coins into a small cloth bag around the dead person's neck. This is called the Roku Monzen. The Sanzu River is a bureaucratic nightmare, and if you don't have those 6 coins to pay the toll, you meet Datsuba, the clothes-stripping old hag of the underworld. If you can't pay her, she doesn't just turn you away, she forcefully tears off your funeral kimono. And if you're already naked, she will literally strip off your skin and hang it on a tree branch to weigh your earthly sins. Suddenly, paying a toll doesn't sound so bad, does it? But what if you are the ultimate overachiever? What if you don't want to wait around for the hag, the coins, or the slow slide of the family ash pile? Then you do what the extreme, mountain-dwelling ascetics of Yamagata did. You become a Shokushin Butsu. You mummify yourself while you're still breathing. This wasn't just a fast. This was a 10-year scientific Sorry, my camera went off for a second. First, she spent thousands of days eating nothing but pine needles, bark, and stones, melted away every single ounce of body fat. Fat holds moisture, and moisture breeds rot. Next, you spent another 1,000 days drinking a highly toxic tea made from the sap of the urushi tree. The exact same poisonous lacquer used to coat shiny wooden bowls. Drinking this tea caused massive vomiting, sweating, and rapid dehydration, essentially pickling your organs from the inside out. But the real genius of this lacquer sap? It made your flesh so incredibly toxic that when you finally died, maggots and flesh-eating beetles couldn't even stand the taste of you. You were a living, walking bottle of pesticide. Finally, you'd get lowered into a stone tomb just big enough to sit cross-legged in the lotus position. They'd seal you in with a wooden bamboo straw for air and a little brass bell. Every day, you'd ring the bell to let monks above know you were still meditating. The day the bell went silent, they'd pull the straw, seal the tomb, and wait another 1,000 days. If they dug you up and you weren't a puddle of putrid goo, you were declared a living Buddha. You beat the system. You became a permanent leather-wrapped monument to spiritual willpower. But for those who don't have the stomach for self-pickling, or those who die violently with a bitter grudge, they return as a Yuri. A Yuri is a classic Japanese ghost, and let me tell you, they make Western ghosts look like absolute amateurs. A Western ghost is a geographically lazy. They haunt an old Victorian mansion, a creaky library, or a spooky well. If you get scared, you can just pack your bags, move to a different state, and live your life. A Japanese Yuri does not care about your zip code. They are not bound to a house. They are bound to a person. If you betray someone so deeply that they die of a broken and vengeful heart, their spirit will latch onto your back like a metaphysical parasite. It doesn't matter if you run to Paris, New York, or a tropical island. When you turn around in the mirror, they will be standing right behind you, limp-wristed, footless, with wild black hair draped over a pale, unblinking face. And if you're walking home tonight and you hear the distinct, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of wooden sandals following you in the pitch black, don't run. That's just Beto-Beto-san, the invisible footstep spirit. Running only makes him chase you. Instead, do what your ancestors did. Take a deep breath, step politely to the side of the road, bow to the empty air, and say, "After you, Beto-Beto-san." The footsteps will pass by you, and you'll live to see another sunrise. Now you light the fire outside your door, small, careful, just enough smoke to be seen from very far away. by something that has been dead for 11 years. This is the whole point of tonight. You want to see the smoke. You want to follow the light home. In most of the world, that sentence would get you committed. Here, it gets you a 3-day family reunion. Because tonight, somewhere between the 13th and 16th, the wall here, between here and not here, gets thin enough to walk through. And your job, your literal cultural obligation, is to leave the porch light on for a corpse. Welcome to Obon. Japan's answer to what if we just invited them back? Tonight we're going to talk about a festival that took the single most terrifying premise in human history. The dead don't actually leave, and turn it into a national holiday with snacks. Then we're going to talk about what happens the other 362 days of the year when Japan's ghosts don't wait for an invitation. Stick around, there's a vegetable horse, there's a woman who counts to 9 forever, and there's a very specific way to hold your chopsticks that will get you looked at like you just confessed a murder. Let's get the history out of the way because the backstory of Obon is somehow more disturbing than the most of the ghost stories I've covered on this show. Obon is short for Urabon, which is the Japanese mouthful for the Sanskrit word ulambana. And ulambana translates roughly to hanging upside down. Not metaphorically, that's the actual state of being this festival was invented to fix. The story goes, a monk named Mokuren, a top-tier disciple of the Buddha, basically spiritual special forces, used his powers to check on his dead mother. Big mistake. He finds her in the Gakido, the realm of hungry ghosts, where the punishment is an eternity of starvation so precise that food and water combust the second she touches them. She is, quite literally, hanging upside down in torment. Ulambana checks out. Mokuren does what any traumatized son with supernatural powers would do. He panics and goes straight to the Buddha. The Buddha's advice is basically, stop trying to save her yourself. It doesn't work like that. Instead, be monks. Be generous to the living. On behalf of the dead. Mokuren does it. His mother is instantly released. And then, this part always gets me. He's so relieved, he just starts dancing. That spontaneous dance of relief is the origin of Bon Odori, the Bon dance, which is still the centerpiece of Obon festivals today. So every time you see footage of people in yukatas dancing in a circle under paper lanterns, that's 1,500 years of thank God my mom isn't on fire anymore, choreographed. When Buddhism landed in Japan around the 6th century, it collided with Shinto, Japan's homegrown belief system, which already had ancestor spirits, kami, sore, quietly watching the household like a surveillance system installed by your dead relatives. The two traditions merged almost seamlessly. Buddhism supplied the rescue mission, Shinto supplied the house guest. By the Kamakura period, this had trickled down from temple ritual to something ordinary families did every summer. But here's a thing nobody puts in the tourist brochure. Obon spirits are the polite ones. The ones who RSVP. The ones this whole system was built to welcome and reverence. Shoryo, honored ancestors coming home on schedule. There's a whole other category of Japanese dead who didn't get the invitation, who never left the first place. Let's talk about them. On the west, a ghost is a ghost. Sheet, chain, vibes. Japan looked at that and said, absolutely not. We need a filing system. The general word is yurei, the literal faint or dim spirits. And the original story of why a yuri exists is almost bureaucratic in its cruelty. When a person dies normally, their soul is supposed to cross a river and eventually becomes a Buddha. A process called jobutsu. Clean tradition. Paperwork processed. Everyone moves on. A yuri is what happens when that paperwork gets rejected. Violent death, betrayal, brief, so total it never metabolized. An obsession the person couldn't put down even after their bodies stopped working. Any of that can jam the process. The soul it doesn't cross. It stays here. In the one emotional loop it died inside of, replaying itself. In Japanese art has been drawing these things the same way for centuries. White burial kimono, long black disheveled hair, hands hanging limp at the wrists. And famously, no feet. They don't walk, they drift. Because they're not really arriving anywhere, they just never left. Within that broad category, there's a whole taxonomy, and I want you to notice how specific the emotional cause of each one is. Anryo, the vengeful ones, full-blown wrath given a body again. Driven by betrayal so severe it survives death. This is the horror movie Yuri. The one who breaks the physics of the house because someone wronged her badly enough that dying didn't end the argument. Ubum. The ghost of a woman who died pregnant or died in childbirth, still trying to care for a child she never got to raise. There's a version of this called the Kosodate Yuri, the child-rearing ghost, a mother who died but kept coming back night after night to buy candy for the baby she left behind, until someone finally realized the coin she paid with was a burial offering, and followed her straight to a grave with a crying infant inside it. Sit with that one for a second. That's not a jump scare, that's just what love does when you don't let it stop. Goryo, a vengeful spirit of the aristocratic and powerful, first recorded back in Heian period. These aren't personal hauntings, they're civic ones. The belief that a wronged nobleman's fury was big enough to cause plagues, famine, actual natural disaster. Historical Japan built shrines specifically to appease certain dead politicians. Imagine being so petty in life that after you die, people have to keep bribing you with festivals so you don't cause a drought. Kunayure, spirits of people who drowned, who now try to capsize boats and pull the living down with them into the water. Which is exactly why, to this day, plenty of people in Japan quietly stop swimming right after right after Obon ends. The belief being that unhappy ancestral spirits sent back towards the water on their way to the afterlife are still caught in it. Every single one of these categories is named for the exact emotion that trapped the person: vengeance, motherhood, pride, drowning terror. Japan didn't invent generic ghost. Japan invented ghosts with job titles. And the job title is always the last feeling I had before I stopped being a person. Two stories come up over and over. The everybody already knows this one stories, the Japanese equivalent of, and then she looked in the back seat. Oiwa, the Yotsuya ghost story. Oiwa is married to a man named Ayman, and Ayman has decided he'd rather be married to someone richer. So he doesn't divorce her, he poisons her. The poison doesn't kill her outright, it disfigures her instead. One eye swells and droops. Her hair falls out in clumps, and then, to finish the job, Ayman has her impaled and thrown into a river with her body tied to a door. Staging it looks like a double suicide. Plain getaway. He remarries almost immediately. On his wedding night, he lifts his new bride's veil to kiss her, and it's Oiwa's ruined face looking back at him. In a panic, he draws his sword and beheads the thing under the veil. It's his new wife. He just murdered her in his own home on his wedding night because his first victim never actually left. Okiku, the dish counting ghost. This is one of my favorite Japanese ghost stories I love to tell. A servant's girl entrusted with a set of 10 precious plates. One goes missing. Depending on the versions, she's framed, or she breaks it by accident, or her employer breaks it to have an excuse. Either way, she's killed for it and thrown down a well. And now, at night, from the bottom of that well, you can hear her counting 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9, and then nothing, no 10. Just a silence where the count should finish, followed by a scream, and then she starts again from 1. She has been doing this for centuries, not moving on, not getting revenge, just perpetually, eternally one plate short of being done. Both of these stories notice they are not about ghosts who show up randomly. They're about grievances that literally cannot resolve. Oiwa can't stop being betrayed. Okiku can't stop being one plate away from being finished. That incompleteness is haunting. Now, the most popular version of this I've heard in Japan was Okiku was a dish maiden in one of the castles. The well is actually still there today. You can take pictures. I mean, it is blocked off for the most part, but you can still, for the most part, take pictures of it. But she is a dish maiden she is a Himeji Castle. I had to look it up. Himeji Castle. If you go to Himeji Castle in Japan, you can still see the well. It's still there. This ghost story, fun fact, is what is what encouraged the more modern version of the ring. Obviously, they just made it more modernized, more made it today, where it's now a video. She comes out of the well and countdown. But the original story, like I said, Okiku was a dish maiden. She caught the eye of one of the samurais, and the samurai always asked her to be his lover. She always declined. One day, he was so fed up, he got so impatient, that he took one of her plates and hid it. Knowing very well, Okiku would get in trouble and get blamed. Because after all, she's the dish maiden. And he kind of just happened to mention it to the lord of the castle, like, hey, I kind of noticed. What happened to, isn't there supposed to be 10 plates? I thought I saw 9. And of course, Okiku gets in trouble. She starts counting over and over again. Searching frantically, keeps going back and counting 1 through 9, hoping one time, eventually she'll find a plate and count to 10. Still searching frantically, does not find it. Of course, this samurai goes to Okiku and says, hey, if you agree to be my lover, I will convince the Lord it is not your fault. Of course, she still says no. He snapped. He had it. So he grabs her. He ties her up. He physically hurts her, dunks her into the well, pulls her up. Are you going to be my lover now? She still says no. Repeated the whole process, physically hurting her, dropping her back into the water, pulling her back up. Same thing. Kept going on and on until finally, Okiku is no longer alive. They said after that, for nights after that, Okiku would come out of the well. You'd hear her walking around counting to 9. A freeze, and then a blood-shattering scream. Supposedly, if you are unlucky enough to hear her count to 9, any one of them, you will mysteriously become very ill. If you are even more unlucky enough to hear the scream after, you mysteriously died after. And that is the story I've heard. That's the most story I've heard back when I lived in Japan. Some of this modern urban legend that spreads through schoolyards like a virus, all of it shares the same DNA. Specific, wordly precise rules for staying on the correct side of the dead. Don't cut your nails at night. Old superstition still repeated. If you trim your nails after dark, you won't be present at your parents' deathbed. Nobody can tell you the mechanism. Everybody still avoids doing it. Hide your thumbs when a hearse passes. Your thumbs, in Japanese, is your parent finger. Oya yubi. Tucking it into your fist when a funeral car drives by is meant to protect your own parents from an early death. You will see adults in broad daylight in business suits quietly fold their thumbs into their palm as a hearse goes by. Nobody thinks it's silly. Everyone still does it. Don't whistle at night. Old belief says it attracts snakes or worse, spirits. And in some telling specifically invites Yuri closer. Because a whistle in the dark sounds enough like a call that something might actually answer it. Posthumous names. When someone dies, Buddhist tradition gives them a kaimyo, a new, formal, entirely different name for the afterlife. Part of the stated purpose is to prevent the dead person from returning when their living name is spoken aloud, which means, quietly, underneath a very formal funeral custom, is the assumption that your actual name is kind of a summoning word. And death is exactly when you'd want to stop being reachable by it. And then there's the modern layer, the urban legends that don't come from ancient scripture at all. They come from school kids trading stories the same way American kids traded Bloody Mary and Slender Man. And these two are the reigning champions. Kuchisake Onna, the slit-mouthed woman. Old folklore, going back to the Edo period, about a woman whose husband discovered her affair and, in his rage, cut her mouth open from ear to ear, then asked her, "Who will think you're pretty now?" That's the origin story. Here's the part that should actually worry you. In December of 1978, Japanese children across multiple prefectures started independently reporting a tall woman in a surgical mask approaching them on the street asking one question: "Am I pretty?" Say no. She kills you on the spot. Say yes. She pulls down the mask, shows you the wound, and asks the follow-up. Even now, there is no correct answer. Newspaper covered it as genuine public panic. Parents called police. A woman was actually arrested in 1979 for dressing up as her and carrying a knife. And even after the arrest, sightings didn't stop. They just kept going. To this day, the accepted survival strategies are like giving a vague, non-committal answer. You're average. Tossing candy on the ground to distract her, or just saying you're in a hurry and walking away without breaking eye contact. Entire generations of Japanese kids memorized an escape script for a woman who, as far as anyone can actually prove, does not exist. I also heard you want to say something like I have no opinion, or do you think you're beautiful? That's just what I heard. Tori no Hanako-san. Hanako of the toilet. Every elementary school in Japan, without coordinating with any other elementary school, somehow ended up with the exact same ghost story: a girl who died in a bathroom stall during a World War II air raid, or murdered by a stranger, or through suicide. The story changes school to school and now lives specifically in the third stall of the third floor girls' bathroom. To summon her, you knock 3 times and ask, "Hanako-san, are you there?" If a small voice answers, "Yes," and the door creaks open on its own, you are looking at a ghost with a bob haircut and an outdated red skirt. And depending on which version your school told, she either drags you down through the toilet and into hell, or asks you to play with her. And there's no version of that invitation you want to accept. That's a real horror underneath both of these stories, and it's worth sitting with. Nobody wrote them, no author, no studio, no named source. They just appeared simultaneously in hundreds of schools that had no contact with each other. As if the story itself found the fastest way to spread through a population of children, the way a virus finds a host. Every school has its own hanako. Every neighborhood has its own version of the woman with the mask. The details change. The shape never does. A rule, a question with no safe answer, a place you shouldn't be alone in after dark. Here's what all these, the ancient and the schoolyard, actually have in common. They're not really about ghosts. They're about behavior management with a haunting attached. Don't be careless at night. Respect your parents. Watch what you say. The dead in Japanese folklore aren't just something that happens to you. They're a permanent, invisible enforcement mechanism for how you're supposed to live. Here's the part that should generally unsettle you. A huge amount of ordinary Japanese table etiquette exists specifically because it overlaps with funeral ritual, and everyone at the table knows it, even if nobody says it out loud. At a Japanese cremation, and Japan cremates almost everyone, over 99% of the deceased, the family performs something called katsuage. After the cremation, two family members pick up the remaining bones out of the ash together, using long chopsticks, passing certain bones between each other before placing them in the urn. Feet first, head last. So the person isn't lying upside down inside their own urn for eternity. That's how specific this gets. That single ritual is the reason two of the most ironclad rules in Japanese dining exist. Never pass food from chopsticks to chopsticks. You are, without knowing it, recreating the exact motion of two relatives transferring a bone. Never stick your chopsticks upright in a bowl of rice. At a funeral altar, a bowl of rice with chopsticks standing straight up is left for the deceased. It's the meal they no longer need. Now do that at a dinner table, and you have just visually served everyone present a plate for a corpse. Older relatives will not explain this to you. They'll just wince. Because in Japan, the line between normal life and funeral isn't drawn with big dramatic warnings. It's drawn with tiny specific physical gestures that everyone was trained to recognize before they were old enough to ask why. The numbers get on it too. The number 4, shi, is pronounced the exact same word for death. The number 9, ku, sounds like suffering. Condolence money is never given in the amount containing either never 4,000 yen, never 40,000, never 9,000. Hospitals skip room numbers for the same way American buildings skip the 13th floor. An entire culture quietly rerouting around two numbers because of how they sound. For a language where sound and meaning are stitched together tighter than most Westerners realize. And the funeral itself has its own calendar logic. Certain days on old 6-day cycle are considered actively bad luck for a funeral. One in particular, Tomobiki, translates to something like pulling your friends along with you. Families will never schedule a funeral around that day specifically, so the dead person doesn't drag anyone else after them. That's not a metaphor. That's calendar planning based on literal fear of the dead having a +1. Then finally, the cemetery itself. Japanese graves are usually shared family stone monuments, generations stacked under one name, not the individual headstone per person layout you'd picture in the West. Family visits regularly, especially around Obon and on death anniversaries, to clean the stone, pour water over it with a small wooden ladle, leave flowers and incense. It's tender. It's also quietly maintenance. Because the underlying belief running under all of this is the same one running under the whole episode. The dead don't stay gone on their own. Somebody has to keep doing the work of remembering them correctly on schedule, or the arrangement breaks down. Also, from what my understanding is, they started doing the ancestral ones because there is obviously a land shortage in Japan, so that kind of like solves that problem of where do you put the dead. Which brings us back finally to someone who took that job a little too seriously. Every year, Hisako did it exactly the way her grandmother taught her. Not close enough exactly. The fire, first night, same spot by the gate. 4 toothpicks in a cucumber, no more, no less. Her grandmother used to say a 5-legged horse was showing off and would attract the wrong kind of attention. The eggplant cow, always slower to make than the horse. Because her grandmother believed you should never rush the part where you say goodbye. Even when you're just skewering vegetables in a kitchen at 11 p.m. The year after her grandmother died, Hisako did all of it alone for the first time. And she did it better than ever, more precise, more devoted. She told herself this was grief being useful for once. Channeled it into a ritual instead of just leaking out everywhere. On the 3rd night, she noticed the eggplant cow hadn't moved from the altar. That's not unusual on its own. What was unusual was that the horse was gone. She made both animals the same night, same table, same hands. The cow, heavier, harder to balance, was still exactly where she left it. The lighter one, the fast one, the one whose entire job was to arrive quickly, had simply vanished. No mice, no draft, no fallen behind the altar, gone. Like something had picked it up and actually used it. She told herself the cat did it. She does not have a cat. By the 4th night, a night that notably does not exist in the Obon calendar because the dead are supposed to be gone by the 3rd, she started hearing the toothpick horse. 4 small, precise clicks on the hallway floor. Fast, eager. The gate of something that had been given exactly one job. Get home quickly. And had done it perfectly and now had absolutely no instructions for what came next. Because Hisako, without meaning to, without even noticing she was doing it, had never made the eggplant cow leave. She made it beautifully. She made it slow, unhurried, exactly the way her grandmother taught her to say a proper goodbye. She had just never actually let it go. Here's the question that shows that this show keeps landing back on, episode after episode. No matter which century or country we're in, when something won't leave, is the dead refusing to go, or is the living refusing to release them? Hisako didn't build a haunting. She built a loop. Every welcoming fire was perfect. Every horse was fast, obedient, loyal. And every single year, somehow, some small, unconscious part of her mind made sure the goodbye ritual, the floating lantern, never quite finished the job. Because finishing the job meant the house would be quiet again, meant grief would have nowhere left to go and stand still in. The horror in Obon was never a ghost. Obon assumes the ghost. Obon builds an entire national infrastructure, festivals, fires, vegetable horses, cremation rites, chopstick taboos, a whole calendar of unlucky days around expecting the dead to show up and treat that as a normal, even sweet. Okiku still counts to 9. Oiwa still shows up under wedding veils. A mother in an old story is still buying candy for a baby with a coin from her own grave. None of them are malfunctions. They're just grief that never got its paperwork approved. Hisako's grandmother isn't trapped because the underworld had bad transit options. She's trapped because somewhere in a kitchen at 11 p.m., her granddaughter kept whittling one leg too slow on a cow that was supposed to be walking her back into the dark. So next time you hear someone say, just let them go, remember that there's an entire 1,500-year-old religious tradition built specifically around how hard that instruction actually is to follow. Some cultures write a eulogy. Japan built a whole logistics system, complete with a fast horse, a slow cow, a bone-picking ceremony, and a hard rule about where your chopsticks are allowed to stand. Because even a festival designed to say goodbye properly still has to trick the living into actually doing it. If this one got under your skin, do me a favor and send it to one friend who still keeps a dead relative's phone number in their contacts. You know who you are, both of you. This has been the Phantom Navigator. I'm your host. I light the fire. I built the horse. I never build the cow slow enough. Rate, follow, and I will see you or something wearing your shape next week.